This week, my talk with New Yorker cartoonist Joe Dator about his hilarious book of his cartoons and cartoonist backstory, Inked. First, if you're enjoying this podcast, we'd love it if you'd support the show at patreon.com/deconcomics for as little as $2 a month. All patrons get our bi-weekly videos featuring 20th century TV trivia quizzes, more perks and bonus content at higher donation levels, including discussions of MCU movies and Lee Ditko Spider-Man stories, and help us meet our goals to unlock the earliest episodes of our podcast and put them all back in the feed. Pledge your support now at patreon.com/deconcomics. This is Tim, and this is Deconstructing Comics. Okay, I am now talking with Joe Dator. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good.
Okay, that's good. Yeah.
That's it. Okay, goodbye.
Yeah.
Good to talk to you.
So,
how are you?
I'm fine. Yeah, pretty much.
That's what I want to talk. I want to talk about how you
are. Joe was on the show. I can't believe it was 5 years ago. With the first time I interviewed you.
First time, yeah, that was the first time.
Yeah, well, then you showed up on To the Bat Polls, and I showed up on your podcast, which I guess doesn't exist anymore.
It has been scrubbed clean from the internet because out of spite. I was so angry that it wasn't a huge success right off the bat that I literally, as they say, took my ball and went home.
And then you also came on.
If you want it, I'll send you a link to all the episodes.
Well, I think I might still do I still have it? Or, did you take it down?
Yeah, I did. I literally killed it. I murdered it with a knife.
Okay, yeah, I guess it's not in my podcast player anymore.
Murdered it with a bold stroke. I struck it down. That was my angry temper tantrum I had because it didn't gather a huge audience immediately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you weren't as successful as Alex Robinson. Neither am I, but
yeah, no, and I was just angry. I put a lot of work into that show, and it was a funny show. I thought it was really funny. Some of the episodes I still think are hilariously funny, mm-hmm. and but it just didn't gather an audience. And every time I would put an episode out after working on it so much, my heart would just break. And after a while, after 52 episodes, my heart couldn't take anymore. It was just it was so emotionally painful to put out an episode and get 200 downloads that week or something like that. And it was just God, I just couldn't do it anymore. And this is what I have to look forward to when my book comes out in the fall, which is if it doesn't sell a lot immediately, I'm going to get every bookstore and just burn every copy of it. I won't do that.
Well, I should mention for people who don't know, your podcast was Songs You're Sick Of.
Yeah, it was, and the fundamental problem with the show was that the title had nothing to do with what the show was about. We were not there to talk about being sick of songs. We were just there to talk about songs that were ubiquitous, that were played everywhere all the time, mm-hmm. that you've heard a million zillion times. But we weren't there to talk about being sick of them. We were just there to sort of figure out what they're about.
Yeah.
And I'm still kicking myself as to why didn't I just call the show "What Is This Song About?" Because then people would actually know what they were going to get. And I learned a valuable lesson, which is when you're putting out a product, make sure people know what it is. Mm-hmm. Put it right on the label. Put it right on the label. This is a bottle of ketchup or whatever it is. Make sure there's no confusion there. Because if you're trying to be cheeky and tongue-in-cheek and trying to be clever about it, no one's going to know what the hell you're selling.
I don't know. It spoke to me. I figured out what it was exactly, but I don't know. I seem to be...
Well, you looked past the title is the thing, and very few people did, I found out. So you need, yeah. The first rule of podcasting is make sure your title explains the premise of your show, because most people won't go past that.
You were also on the show. The last time you were on was when we talked about Mad Magazine, which,
That's right,
you know,
yeah.
the death of Mad Magazine was greatly exaggerated, I guess.
Somewhat. I mean, they're not doing new issues like they used to, but they're still putting out material. They still exist as a company.
Yeah, I guess
So we
it's
don't know what could happen in the future.
like they have some reprint in material and some new material in each issue.
I'm not even sure actually. That might be the case.
I was reading it, but I don't seem to have time to finish it anymore, so I
Well,
quit
that's
buying it.
most things, yeah.
Anyway, you mentioned your book called Inked, so tell us about the book.
It's a collection of my cartoons, some published, some unpublished. Well, I'll tell you the title of the book because the title explains the premise. I learned my lesson. The title of the book is Inked: Cartoons, Confessions, Rejected Ideas, and Secret Sketches from the New Yorker's Joe Dator. And that tells you everything that's in the book. Um,
Yeah.
there's plenty of cartoons. There's some of my sort of greatest hits that were in the New Yorker. And then there's some that quite a few that never got in the New Yorker, that have never been published, have never been seen before, sort of a rejection collection.
Hmm.
Um, there's confessions, lots of confessions, lots of me uh, telling you what it's really like to be a cartoonist and the hardships of it, the pain, the
Hmm.
heartbreak.
Well, yeah, in the intro, you talk about sitting for hours desperately trying to come up with an idea. I mean, it looks like a hellacious job. How do you keep yourself coming back to do it again?
Well, there's a lot of factors involved. One being it's the only thing I can do. It's the only thing I've really ever been kind of good at.
Hmm.
So it's really, that's it for me. But there's also the fact that I really do love being a cartoonist. I, I love, it's the old saying, I hate writing, I love having written.
Hmm.
That very much applies to all of us in the gag cartoon field who submit ourselves to this grind every week, you know.
Yeah.
We just love we're so addicted to the results that come out, when you come out with a good gag cartoon. It's one picture with a few words, and that's all it is. And it's almost like you've performed a magic trick. It's almost like you've created this amazing thing that strangers are laughing at. And
Hmm.
once you get that fix, you're hooked.
Yeah. And going with the book's title, you are still working in ink. Have you had any thoughts of going digital?
I've done a lot of digital art actually, but I do like the just feel of dipping a pen in ink. I use quill pens and I dip them in ink. It's not a lie, just like in the book, and I just enjoy it. I like the feel of it,
Hmm.
and I also like having an original piece of art that exists after I'm done. I like having stacks and stacks of my originals. Um, Although more and more those originals are subjected to digital cleanup and alteration after they're done.
Mm.
So the originals don't always look exactly like they look when they're printed, but I do like having original art. And then, collectors want those. I actually get calls from people who'd like to buy original art from me. And so if it was all digital, I wouldn't really have that. But mostly it's just there's something amazingly beautiful about black ink on white paper and there's just the feel of it and the look of it. It's I don't know, I've never gotten over it.
Hmm.
It's kind of indescribably attractive thing to me.
Yeah. So, according to your publicist,
My publicist.
quote, Joe can discuss, first bullet point, how he turns a spark of inspiration into laugh out loud moments with only a single image and a caption. So, tell us how you do that. It's
Oh
kind of
yeah.
like
Well,
saying, where do you get your ideas? Which is the most hackneyed question you can ask a creator
it's the most yeah, it's the most loaded question.
and
Um
unanswerable.
yeah, I ask it of other cartoonists because I don't know where to get ideas. In the book I say I often get asked where do you get your ideas? Is there a specific place like in the woods?
Hmm.
And there isn't any one place. There's no one source of ideas. There's no one process. And I'm just so bad at my work habits. My work habits are so erratic. I never learned good work habits when I was younger. So I really have no specific technique for it. And sort of one of the things you find in the book is that you get ideas from everywhere. And how they turn into cartoons can happen instantly, immediately, like a spark of inspiration that just hits you like lightning, or you can labor over them for literally years. What most commonly happens is you'll get one shoe of an idea and then wait for the other shoe to drop. And that usually involves, like, you think of something like, cranes. I'd like to do a cartoon about cranes. Cranes are kind of funny. They wade in the marsh, and they have long beaks and weird looking legs, and they stand there, and there's got to be some humor in cranes. So then I'll write down cranes, and I'll start drawing cranes. But then I'm like, well, in order to create a joke, you're juxtaposing two disparate points of reference that seemingly don't belong together.
Yeah.
But subliminally they do belong together. And your brain has to process the fact that the one thing and the other thing together don't make sense, but then they really do make sense. So that's what you're sort of hoping for. And so you're writing down cranes. Let me see, cranes. Then I'm like, so what is the other point of reference that gets juxtaposed against cranes that makes it into a joke? And that can come right away. Like, let's see, what if I put and you start asking yourself these questions. What if I put a crane on a city bus? Or what if I have a crane working in an office? Or what if I have a crane who's married to a human woman and they're sitting in bed having conversation? And what if I have a crane whose boss is chewing him out for, something? Or, that, and then eventually the second shoe of that will drop where you'll get the punchline. If cranes are the setup, then the next thing you need is the punchline. And that can happen instantly, or I can put cranes aside, and 3 years later I'll think of what the joke about cranes is. And in the book I explain that it can take years. Sometimes it can take years, literally. And I have quite a few cartoons in that where I wrote down I got the first half of it was ready, and then the rest of it came years later. And you just have a sketchbook full of these things that you're waiting to bring them in for a landing, so to speak. It all sounds hilarious, doesn't it? It sounds like a hilariously fun job to have, doesn't it?
So juxtaposition of two things that don't go together, the absurdity is funny. Although I was looking at that comic, your cartoon where the guy has replaced all his books on his shelf with sandwiches. And it's funny because it's absurd, but I was thinking, so just being absurd is not necessarily funny. So what makes something absurd that is funny?
Well, that one, I couldn't tell you why that's funny. Honestly, I'm good at analyzing my jokes, but I don't even know why that's funny. The great thing about art is is that there are no rules, and you have to remember there's no rules. So everything I just said about what makes a joke, so the next person comes along and comes up with a joke that defies all those rules, but it's funny anyway. That person's right too. So, there's really no rules. So I don't know what makes that funny. It's just, that was one that it was just a picture I had in my head. I guess it's funny because you think people are like men are stupid, I guess. There's a kind of it hits a kind of a nerve with me. I don't even know if I understand what the nerve is, but there's something about like most people would rather eat a sandwich than read a book, because that's what most people are like, And that guy seems way too happy about it. He's so proud of it. He's showing his date. I assume that's a woman he's dating, and she's at his house for the first time. He's invited her over, and he's showing her around, and that's what he's showing her. Is he has a bookshelf full of sandwiches,
and that bread is stale.
Well, I guess so. Yeah, there's no refrigeration there. It's just,
unless he restocks it every day.
Yeah, I guess people aren't going to see this cartoon, but it's just a guy and a woman, and the guy is at home, and he has a bookshelf which looks like it's stocked full of books, but upon closer inspection, they're just sandwiches. And he's very proud of this, and he's just taking one off the shelf and putting it on a plate to eat it, and saying, "I have so much more room since I replaced." Yeah, I think it's something like got rid of all my books and replaced them with sandwiches, and I have so much more room now I can't remember. But it was just a weird image that struck me as funny. I have no idea why. I still can't explain it.
Yeah, since I got rid of all my books, I've had so much more room for sandwiches.
That's it. Since I got rid of all my books, what a horrible thing. What a horrible turn of phrase. Got rid of all my books. And he's so happy. I think that's what struck me as funny. He's saying this hideous thing, I got rid of all my books, with a big smile on his face. And it just seemed like such a, I don't know, it seemed like so relatable in some way, because like you can look at that guy and say, what a jerk. But on some level, yeah, he's all of us. He's me too. I like sandwiches. and I've barely read a book in the last year. So I have a pile next to my bed that I need to read, and there's some part of me that I can't deny that I am that guy. So that's why the second word in my title is confessions, because a lot of my cartoons are confessions themselves, you know. Whenever you see a person acting like a jerk in a cartoon, it's not because I observed another person being a jerk. It's because I observed myself being a jerk. That's almost always the case.
Okay. I was interested in your discussion of the Mrs. Robinson cartoon, because I thought about like phrasing of punchlines myself, and how it seems like the funny part of it needs to be as close to the end of the sentence as possible.
Yeah.
And the original line that you were referring to from The Graduate is, you're trying to seduce me, aren't you, Mrs. Robinson? But yeah, having Mrs. Robinson at the end of the sentence messes up the humor. If you put the mention of her at the beginning, it works a lot better.
Yeah, it's a cartoon where it's the scene from The Graduate, from the poster, where you're sort of looking through Mrs. Robinson's stockinged leg, and you're seeing Benji in the background, and the in my cartoon, her leg is sort of indicating, she's like pointing with her toe to a laptop, and Benji is saying, Mrs. Robinson, are you trying to get me to listen to your podcast?
Yeah.
And that was done this goes back to what we were talking about before. This I did when I was doing a podcast, and I realized how hard it was to get people to listen to it. Mm-hmm. You practically had to seduce them. And that was when I got that idea. And, you know, I thought people who were on the show as guests weren't even listening to their own episode. I thought, like, my God, it's so hard. You gotta practically tie them down and force people to listen to it.
I listened to mine, just to be clear. I did listen to the one I was on.
At the very least, you listen to your own, and I appreciate that. Yeah. So I had that idea, and then of course there's some part of me that's like anal retentive, so I had to get it accurate to the line in the movie. And in the movie, of course, everyone remembers him saying, "Mrs. Robinson, are you trying to seduce me?" But he doesn't say that at all. He says, "You're trying to seduce me, Mrs. Robinson, aren't you?"
Yeah, aren't you, Mrs. Robinson, was the way you wrote it in the book.
Yeah, and I had written the line out accurately to that, with just replacing the seduce with the podcast line. And I thought, well, that's just like it says in the movie. And it didn't sell. I submitted it like 3 times, and it didn't work. And then I realized, oh, you have to actually you have to reference things in cartoons, not the way they are, but the way people remember them. You have to, in the book I say, you have to print the legend, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had another one which is not in the book, but it's where it's the ending of King Kong. And, you know, Kong is laying dead on Fifth Avenue in front of the Empire State Building, and there's a huge crowd of people around his big dead ape body. And you see Carl Denham next to the cop, and Carl Denham says to the cop, "It wasn't the airplanes, 'twas all these damn yogurt places killed the beast." And that was at the time when it was like 10 years ago, people were complaining about the massive proliferation of yogurt places in New York City. They were cropping up everywhere. Yogurt places were opening up inside other yogurt places. It was that bad. And it was just this sort of comment on how the city is so is getting so gentrified and and losing all of its character, especially with the proliferation of chain stores. And I thought that was a nice juxtaposition with a New York from the 1930s, which was so full of life and character and so unique, and juxtaposing that with the New York of the 2010s, which was New York with these generic sort of pinkberry places on every corner. And that was the joke there. But what I was saying was, in my cartoon, he says "twas," "twas," and he doesn't say "twas" in the movie at all. He says it wasn't the airplanes; it was Beauty killed the Beast. But everybody remembers him saying "twas Beauty killed the Beast."
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah, I had to put "twas" in the cartoon, or else it wouldn't have sounded right. It just didn't sound right without it.
Now, I don't know if you've ever done a Casablanca cartoon, but that's another line that nobody quotes correctly, because he never says "play it again, Sam." I was shocked when I first watched that movie. Where's "play it again, Sam"?
Play it, Sam. You played it for her. Play it for me. Play it.
Yeah, right, but if you did a cartoon, it would have to be based on the "play it again."
Absolutely.
Even though he never says that.
And others have. Yeah, I've never done a Casablanca cartoon, but other cartoonists, I can't remember. It might have been my friend Ben Schwartz who did a cartoon referencing "Play It Again, Sam" and Casablanca. But of course, he based it on "Play It Again, Sam," because the accurate line in the movie just doesn't scan right. So the thing about cartoons is you have to communicate an idea in a split second.
Yeah, well, just "Play It, Sam" is too kind of bland. It's no wonder nobody remembers it correctly, because it sounds so much better with "again."
Yeah. And I was find those things very interesting. I always thought it was apocryphal that in Dirty Harry, Clint Eastwood says, "Well, do ya, punk?" after he gives the speech about the 44 Magnum, and he says, "Do you feel lucky? Well, do ya, punk?" And I always had the sense that I bet people are throwing in punk. I bet people are adding the punk to that, because I bet in the real movie he just says, "Well, do ya?" Looked it up. Watch the movie. He says punk. It's real. So that one turned out to be real. That's entirely accurate. Do ya, punk?
Although they tend to shorten it and say, "Do you feel lucky, punk?"
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's right. A lot of people reference it that way. But it's, "Do you feel lucky? Well, do ya, punk?" It's a bit much. Bit much, Clint, don't you think? Maybe turn it down a notch. I don't know. It was the 70s. What are you going to do?
So you had a cartoon with a lens flare in it. I was wondering how you rendered that lens flare. It looked like you used whiteout or something.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It was a very simple joke of a woman getting dressed for a party, and it's sort of the old trope of, does this dress make me look fat? And there's been a million variations on that joke, And so I just have her saying, "Does this lens flare make me look fat?" And you can't even really see her dress because it's obscured by this massive lens flare that's covering it.
This is the J.J. Abrams version of the fat joke.
Yeah, I think I must have done that about 10 years ago. So it was right around the time when he came out with the new Star Trek, and there was a lot of talk about the lens flares in the J.J. Abrams movies and all that. And it wasn't so much that I wanted to do a lens flare, but it was that I realized, people know about lens flares now. It was this realization that, this gives me a new toy to play with, because now the general public, the general cartoon consuming public, will get this reference, and they might not have 2 years earlier or 5 years earlier. And it was great. It was like, there's a new thing people know about. And you're always looking for references that people know about, things that are universal that everybody gets, or that enough people get. So it's like that, Mrs. Robinson cartoon. I was only able to do that because The Graduate is such a large part of American culture that everybody gets the reference. Even people who haven't seen the movie get the reference.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, we're at a moment in history where I could probably get a lens flare joke to work, where I can do that. So I thought it would be fun to do, and I also thought, wouldn't it be fun to paint it and just do it like manually and just analog style, which I did. I rendered the lens flare mostly with like ink wash and white paint.
Okay.
And I think it turned out okay.
Yeah. When I first kind of glanced at it, I didn't even think about the drawing of it because it looked like a lens flare. So, and then when I read the book a second time, like I took a closer look at it. Yeah, it looks like it's drawn in white. So
yeah. Well, I say in the book it's no CGI, kids. But I don't know. I guess there's a lot of artists now who are doing all their work digital, and I guess it would be pretty easy to just Photoshop an actual real-looking lens flare onto a cartoon. It might not be as interesting, though. I don't know. Not to toot my own horn, but I really like the way I did it. I like that I did it analog. I feel like I pulled off a little trick there.
Coming up, Joe talks about his character, Walter, stripping down old cartoons for parts, a 3D cartoon gag, and more. Don't forget you can help to unlock classic early episodes of Deconstructing Comics, help me return all the old episodes to this podcast feed, and at the $4 level, get access to hours of additional full-length podcasts. At the $10 level, you can review the book of your choice with me here on this show. Support Deconstructing Comics and our other shows at patreon.com/deconcomics. Or you can send a one-time donation via PayPal to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We appreciate your support.
Sawate. My name is Stella, and I am the host of Batgirl to Oracle, the Barbara Gordon podcast. Batgirl to Oracle is a podcast dedicated to Barbara Gordon, the first woman to hold the mantle of Batgirl for an extended period of time, roughly 1967 to 1988. The goal of Batgirl to Oracle is to examine the character's history from her first appearance as Batgirl and continuing through her tenure as Oracle. Each episode looks at a vintage issue of Detective Comics or Batman, as well as other books like Justice League and Freedom Fighters, and modern issues of Batgirl and Birds of Prey. I also keep track of news involving Batgirl and other members of the Bat family, and I have a revolving series of segments like Babs in the Tube, which highlights appearances of Babs in TV and film, Shipper Spotlight, which looks at a variety of comic and pop culture couples, gives their history, and determines whether they are hot or not. Reading with Stella, which could be described as an audio drama, or just me reading a book that relates to Babs or doesn't, and of course, the mainstay literature recommendation. I have been blessed to interview writers Scott Beatty and Chuck Dixon on their Batgirl Year 1 work, Brian Q. Miller on his Batgirl run, Dwayne Swarzynski and Christy Marks on their separate Birds of Prey work, and the creators and actors of the Batgirl Spoiled, the web series. I hope to interview more creators and actors in the future. My goal, most importantly, is to make a fun, entertaining, and thoughtful show that people enjoy and from which they learn. Find the show online at thebatmanuniverse.net and iTunes, and follow the show on Facebook and Twitter at Batgirl to Oracle. Thank you, and fly on, Babs lovers.
So tell us about Walter. I see him standing behind you here. We're talking on Skype.
Walter, let's see. Walter is a character that I've drawn into cartoons quite a number of times, and he's kind of a boring businessman-looking guy. He's this sort of doughy, balding, middle-aged guy with a mustache, and he always wears the same sort of button-down shirt with a tie, and he's just a very he looks like a guy who works in an office who's just kind of a bland guy who you wouldn't even notice really, and I started drawing him just in cartoons whenever I needed a boring businessman type guy in a cartoon, and it came up a lot, and it was always sort of funny. And I ended up using him in enough cartoons that I gave him a name, and I called him Walter. Actually, I initially called him Walter Groovy. He had a full name, was Walter Groovy, but then I decided to drop his last name, so he's just Walter now. He's now officially canonized in the book as just simply Walter. And in the book, I go into some detail about the genesis of Walter. He was sort of inspired by somebody I knew when I was working in an office at the time. And then he sort of evolved into my favorite character to draw. And I really do like drawing him to the point where I created a life-size cardboard cutout that I've taken around the world with me.
Yeah, you brought him here to Tokyo even a couple years ago.
Yeah, he got to enjoy the bustling streets of Tokyo, although I gave him a slight alteration in his look when I brought him to Japan, which is I made his face look more like an anime face. So the Walter when you saw Walter in Tokyo, he was a little bit different looking. I try to change him slightly when I bring him places. So I brought him to Australia. I changed his tie so it was an Australian flag. So it was a little slightly patriotic there.
How do you pack him when you take him around? He's kind of big.
I mean, he pays for his own seat. It's none of my business. He just comes with me. I don't know. And I don't ask him where he gets the money for the plane tickets. So.
I mean, is he foldable? Can you put him in a suitcase? Or
there are various techniques I have used in order to get him from one side of the earth to the other. They are proprietary, however.
I see. Okay.
I prefer to say I'm going places with him.
Okay.
He doesn't want to go. He didn't want to go to Japan alone. That was why I came with him.
You have a section in the book of comics that you say nobody gets. And actually, most of them still made me laugh, but there was a different one elsewhere in the book that I sort of stared blankly at and couldn't.
Oh, please!
Quite.
I can't wait.
It's
because
the one.
As I say in the book, explaining jokes makes them funnier.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I can't wait. I can't wait to explain it.
So it's the one that's like a kid's drawing with a house and a tree and a sun, and they all have faces. And there's also a car in the picture that doesn't have a face. And the house says to the tree, "Oh no, I hate this guy."
They're talking about the sun with the big happy face.
Okay.
He's just a bit too chipper. He's just,
Okay, that's what I ended up concluding, but I don't know, the car kind of confused me. I wondered if he was talking about the driver of the car.
Yeah, I never considered that the car should also be anthropomorphic. I was trying to, imitate like a 5-year-old kid drawing, and I actually drew that one in crayon. I actually got actual Crayola crayons to draw that one in. I submitted that over and over again to the New Yorker, and they never took it. And I just drew my best sort of approximation of what like a 5-year-old drawing would be. It didn't occur to me to make the car to give the car a happy face along with the sun and the tree. So I don't know. Maybe I should have.
Yeah, or I thought maybe there was a regular human, maybe stick figure driver in the car that the house didn't like.
Yeah, I didn't. That didn't even occur to me. I guess I don't know. Do little kids anthropomorphize the sun always? Right.
Uh-huh.
Every little kid has drawn the sun with a big happy smiley face.
Yep, guilty.
Yeah, and then I guess the tree and the house is a bit of a stretch for me. I don't know. Let's just attribute this drawing to one very strange little 5-year-old. Let's just say that we don't know what this 5-year-old was thinking when he drew that. He may have,
Talk about making cartoons that aim to spoil people's affection for something that's beloved, such as bubble wrap.
Oh, okay.
And why are you so evil?
There's one of the cartoons in the book is about. I was thinking about the phenomenon of people loving to pop bubble wrap, and I thought, wouldn't it be funny if there was a dark underside to that? And what I came up with was that the bubble wrap you're popping was once the skin of an animal. And I drew this farm where they're herding these bubble sheep or whatever they are. I don't know what they are. They're just animals that have bubble wrap for skin, and they look so cute and innocent. And they're being herded into a barn where they're I can't even really relate it. They're being flayed alive, and their skin is being packed up onto a truck that's going to Staples. And I just thought that was so awful and horrible and dark and disturbing. I just had to draw it. I guess there was some pleasure of take this happy thing that everybody likes and takes for granted and make it dark. But I think the reason that works is because there's a truth to it. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's some truth to all humor, and the truth of it is that every day we're enjoying modern things that have a dark side to them and a dark origin to them. I mean, did you eat a hamburger today? Millions of people did, and nobody really wants to think about what went into getting that hamburger into their mouths. Mm-hmm. People who misinterpreted that cartoon accused me of promoting animal cruelty, and I said, no, this cartoon is a criticism of animal cruelty. It's a criticism of the sort of callous way in which we just disregard a massive amount of cruelty that is necessary for our modern lives to take place.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether it be cruelty inflicted on animals or on the environment or on our fellow humans. You know, I mean, I'm guilty of that as anyone. I'm sitting here with my wonderful iPhone. I don't really want to know what goes on when they put these together. You know, most people don't. So I think it was a cartoon that was published in the New Yorker, and it was very well received by all but that one person, because I think there is a kind of a truth to it. But it's also very disturbing. In my defense, those adorable bubble sheep aren't real. They're not real animals. They don't exist in real life, so I can do anything I want to them.
Yeah, and it's just that the creation of actual bubble wrap pollutes the environment or something because they're plastic.
That may very well be the case. I'm sure they're plastic, right? It's an environmental hazard. Any plastic is, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure you don't have to throw a stick too far to hit the dark side of just about anything.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out. So, yeah, without even realizing it. Yeah, of course there's a dark side to bubble wrap. It's not that one, but it's definitely something.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then, so why is it that the revealing the dark side of something can be funny?
Oh, you got me. I don't know. I mean, I'm usually pretty good at figuring out like what's funny about something, but maybe I don't know. Maybe it's something to do with people seeing that cartoon and recognizing their own role in that, or recognizing that it's really about them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, unless you're that one person who criticized me and you know, that one holier than thou person who, you know, I couldn't really tell you. It just worked.
Mm-hmm. So you also talked in the book about the idea, while quoting you, sometimes I'll take old ideas and old drawings and pick them apart like a vulture so I can reuse parts of them. So how does that work? You gave a couple examples in the book. I was kind of like, oh, okay, that's how it works. But I don't know, I wouldn't have thought to recycle parts of them like that into different cartoons.
Well, I wrote that. It's in the book. I say I use every part of the buffalo with cartoons, but it's mostly out of necessity. It's because I'm not very prolific, and so I have to use pretty much everything I do, and nothing goes. And I try not to let anything go to waste, because if I have anything that is useful or good, or just a drawing, like, you know, like, oh, I couldn't get this thing to work. I'll keep trying, and I'll use that in something else. So in the example I give in the book is that I had just a drawing of some people in Central Park, which the cartoon I was trying to get across with that was not working at all. And then I just used the drawing. Later on, I had an idea that also took place in a park. So rather than draw a brand new park, I just took the old park and repurposed it. And you can call that laziness. I do not call it laziness. I call it resourcefulness.
Okay.
Why waste energy? Why waste my own energy to redraw something when I've already drawn it once? You know. Terry Gilliam used to have a saying, and there was a guy who never wasted a calorie of his own energy. He was, you know, cutting pictures out of books to make animations. You know, he used to say, never draw what you can copy, never copy what you can trace, never trace what you can cut out and paste on. And I've done a lot of that, you know. I've gone in Photoshop cutting things out of one of my drawings and putting it into another drawing, and plenty of that.
Yeah, or then there was Larry. That was an interesting idea. I guess it didn't make the magazine, but I thought it was cool.
Yeah, Larry is who's sitting right here next to me on my desk, actually, at this moment. That was I had an idea that I wanted to do a cartoon in which one of the characters in the cartoon was a three-dimensional person, was a three-dimensional figure, so that it would be a drawing, and everyone in it would be a drawing, a two-dimensional drawing, but then one person in it would be a photograph of a three-dimensional figure. And that was the genesis of it. I had that idea before I had any idea of what the joke would be or what kind of a joke it would be. And it took literally years for me to finally like narrow down like what I wanted to do. And I had a number of ideas. One of them was like a father talking to his son, and the son was three-dimensional, and the father saying, "In my day, we had 2 dimensions and we were happy." Something like that. That didn't quite work. Some sort of a joke, and then I finally came up with a bunch of people in a typical business office, and the environment is a 2-dimensional drawing. The people are 2-dimensional drawings, but there's a guy walking in who is a photograph of a 3-dimensional figure, and he says, "I'm here to fix the 3D printer." And I thought, well, that's such a simple gag. It's so simple and obvious, and anyone can understand it. So then I thought, well, now I've got to come up with this 3-dimensional figure. And so I wasn't sure what to do. I thought about maybe I should hire a professional sculptor, somebody who makes custom action figures, to do that for me. And that didn't really work out. And this is a process that took like a year. And then I finally figured, well, I'm just going to bite the bullet. I'm going to sculpt it myself. I'm going to make this sort of 6-inch tall, it's about 6-inch tall character myself. And I had to figure out how my characters translate into 3 dimensions, which is not so easy. If you ever see like, the sort of figurines of animated characters, sometimes it's a bit awkward because many cartoon characters were never designed to be depicted in 3 dimensions. A good example is The Simpsons. There's a line of Simpsons action figures, and some of them are just very strange to see because Matt Groening never for a moment considered what those characters would look like in 3 dimensions. So I had to figure that out. I had to figure like these weird like slit eyes that I draw, like how would that look in 3 dimensions? I had to figure all that out, and I finally did it. It took ages. I managed to sculpt this 3-dimensional figure and Photoshop him into this environment, and I think it worked. And then submitted it to the New Yorker, and they said no. And I waited about a year, resubmitted it, and they said no. And I waited about a year, resubmitted it, they said no. And then I waited about a year and brought the figure in to the editor to show her the amount of work that went into this cartoon. And I sat across from the cartoon editor, Emma Allen, who's very nice, and I said to her, "Look, if you're gonna say no to this cartoon again, I just want you to know you're not just saying no to me, you're saying no to him." And I wanted her to have to look him in his little slit eyes in person and say no right to his little sculpty clay face, which she had no trouble doing. And that was the point. I thought,
editors are
cold. I guess that one's never getting in. That was never getting in. So I'll put it someday when I do a book. I'll put it in the book. So at least he's finally immortalized. I gave him a name, Larry. Only later did I realize after calling him Larry that he looks a lot like Larry David.
I was just going to say, yes.
He actually does. It didn't really occur to me at the time.
Yeah,
but he has,
with the hair on the sides of the head.
White hair and bald, and he has sort of sideburns there, but, he's a little doughier than Mr. David. All my characters are kind of doughy. Nobody's in good shape in my cartoons. Nobody works out. It's kind of autobiographical.
Do you have any particular favorite of your own cartoons, or is that like picking your favorite kid?
Oh golly! I mean, there's a few of them that are in the book. I do have a lot of things that went in the book that I was never able to get published, but which I just always thought were very funny, and that I always loved. And I thought, well, this is my chance for this to see print. And one of them is I did a cartoon where there's 2 women standing on a street in New York City, and there's a taxi driver, and the taxi driver has been stabbed right through the chest by one of the spires on the Statue of Liberty's crown. And you can see that the entire Statue of Liberty somehow is upside down with its spire through this guy's chest.
I want an explanation.
Strange and dark. There's no explanation as to how that happened, but there it is. It's a New York City cab driver who's been impaled through the chest by one of the spires on the Statue of Liberty's crown. And the one woman seeing this scene turns the other and says, "Only in New York." And that to me is maybe it's one of my favorite cartoons I've ever drawn. It never was able to get it in the New Yorker. I think it maybe was just too dark and disturbing.
Yeah, that was one of the ones you said they don't want you to see.
Right, they. Yeah, although I do mention who they are, and it's a couple in Delaware.
Yeah,
who just seem to have a problem. They just don't have much of a sense of humor. But yeah, that's high on my list of favorite ones I've ever done.
So which is more terrifying, cockroaches or a breakfast plate arranged like a happy face?
Oh, to me, definitely the breakfast plate arranged like a happy face. I'm not fond of cockroaches. In this case, I have a cartoon in the book that's sort of a reference to Kafka.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a 6-foot cockroach. That might give me pause, I would suggest. A 6-foot cockroach, maybe. I've never seen one quite that big. I'm sure it was a difficult time for Gregor Samsa's family when that happened. But I still possibly think that the breakfast plate arranged like a happy face is a little scarier to me. It's just wrong. It used to be a thing. I don't see it around much where they would do this for little kids, where you'd go into a restaurant and they would have the young person's plate. That's what they used to call it. That's what I remember it being called. And it would be pancakes, but then they would arrange the bacon so it looked like a mouth, and they would put, I don't know, like a strawberry in the center as a nose, or like the pat of butter would be the nose sometimes. And then a couple of blueberries would be the eyes, or maybe, I think in my book I drew it as it's got blueberries for eyes and then a pair of breakfast link sausages for eyebrows, I think.
Yeah, well,
I'm not
looking
sure. I drew a few of them.
Through that section, there are different versions. Yes, there's one with sausage link eyebrows, blueberry eyes, and like a scoop of butter for the nose. But and there's another one where the eyes look like maybe wedges of an orange.
Oh, wedges of an orange. That's how they do it sometimes.
Yeah, and strawberry nose.
Yeah, I guess every restaurant that tortures children with this has their own method of it. You know? I don't know. I grew up in the 70s where, children were tortured a lot more by things. I think adults were much more callous to childhood trauma, and so they would traumatize us daily with images and things. And often our cartoons that we were forced to watch were violent, and our Saturday morning shows were weird Sid and Marty Krofft shows, which were full of nightmare fuel, talking hats and things like that. And so I don't know. That comes from me growing up in the 70s.
Okay.
But I do have a section of the book with multiple cartoons on the topic of the breakfast happy smiley face, or whatever you call him. And in all the cartoons, he's alive, which is what makes him so disturbing.
I don't know, he's making me hungry, actually, but...
Well, that works on you. I don't know. I would rather just have a plate of pancakes. I don't need to think that I'm eating a man's face. That doesn't do anything
Right, it doesn't
me.
have to be arranged that way.
No, just, hey, look how happy he is. I'm going to devour him now. Maybe it's some sort of litmus test for future serial killers. Who knows?
Which of your published cartoons do you think has been the most popular?
Oh, hard to say. I think it's probably the one with a pair of praying mantises, where a female praying mantis is saying to the male praying mantis, "After we have sex, but before I kill you, I need your help putting up some shelves." I think that has been reprinted on T-shirts and coffee mugs, and prints are sold of that. And I get royalties. I did that cartoon in 2007, and I get royalties from it every month to this day.
Wow!
So that's definitely been. And it's on greeting cards. It's so popular, I left it out of the book. I thought, you know what? I don't even need to put it in the book.
Right? Yeah, that didn't sound familiar to me. You do have the Manspreading one in here, though.
Yeah, that one. That's where a woman is getting onto a train, a subway train, and there's a man sitting there who has his legs flayed out in such a way that he's taking up the entire bench. And the woman is just reacting to that and saying, "Oh, come on!" And this was done about 5 years ago during the manspreading revolution. It was sort of when that, and I don't know if this was very much of a trope in Japan. I'm guessing it was probably.
I don't know. I mean, I heard about it, but
Yeah.
just from American sources, I think. But
I'm guessing the sort of cultural taboo of manspreading on the subway was something that was probably easily licked in Japan, because I think people there just are more inclined to say, "Oh no, I'm not going to do that." Whereas in the United States, and especially in New York, it became like men became defiant about it. Like, "Oh, you're criticizing people for manspreading. I'm gonna manspread all over the place." That's just the way Americans are. We're just not that polite. And so that it had gotten to the point where it was in the public eye. It was on Twitter. It was things talking about this phenomenon called manspreading, which had always been around.
mm-hmm.
And women weren't the only victims of it either, because I don't know how many times I was on the New York City subway and I was in between two jerks who were, sitting there with their legs flayed out, and I had to crowd myself in, to the point where New York City subway system put up signs and with little illustrations and said, be considerate, don't manspread on the subway. And this, of course, led to a certain amount of backlash from those self-same jerks. So I drew that cartoon, which was just this guy taking manspreading to the ultimate extreme, in a way that is maybe not physically possible unless you're an acrobat.
No, to manspread anymore, you have to be Plastic Man.
You would, right? You'd have to be able to stretch your legs like Reed Richards or something,
Right.
Which he could take up an entire subway car by himself that way. That would be fun. Maybe that's what I should have drawn. I don't know. Just why didn't I think of that? Very nice. I could have got a Fantastic Four reference into the New Yorker. Probably the only one.
Yeah, I doubt if they show up in there very much.
No, because they don't. You know why? Because they don't work. They don't work in movies. They haven't had a hit movie.
Yeah, they had movies, but not huge hit movies yet. I mean, they're coming to the Marvel Cinematic Universe before too much longer, so maybe then they'll make the New Yorker.
Yeah, I think once you have to be in a movie for it to be like enough in the zeitgeist of people's minds that you can become a New Yorker cartoon. And being in a New Yorker cartoon is almost kind of a litmus test for that, for how well known something is.
Yeah. Superman would make it. You got a Superman cartoon in here.
I've done quite a few Superman cartoons, and quite a few that didn't make it in, actually. And yeah, Superman, Batman. I've done a few Batman cartoons. I tried to get an Avengers cartoon in. I think it was Thor and the Hulk in couples therapy. And I think Thor is saying he shares a cinematic universe with me, but not his thoughts. Something like that. I forget what the line was, but that didn't work. And let's see. Well, I've put a few comic book characters in my cartoons. Have I done one about Spider-Man? Spider-Man would be the next, after Superman and Batman, probably the most well-known cartoon character. I've definitely submitted some Spider-Man cartoons, which haven't gotten in. I did one where Spider-Man is sitting there with his mother, and his mother is saying, if you stayed in school, you could have been a spidermatologist by now. Spidermatologist. Didn't really work. Plus, I knew I was opening myself up to a huge amount of online actuallys when people would tell me he was raised by his aunt, not his mother. And to that, my answer is, who the hell cares?
Okay, so when does the book come out?
October 19th, and it's from Turner Publishing in the United States and Goose Lane Editions in Canada. And it's available on, you can go to my website, joedator.com, and there's a buy feature where you can see where all the places you can get the book, or you'll find it in in bookstores, if you actually go out to a bookstore. I don't take that for granted, so I appreciate anyone who does that. So it's there. Let's see. Yeah, and then all the places you buy books, all of your online places, of course. Lately I've been telling people that if they say to me, well, I want to avoid Amazon, I've been saying, well, all of your legendary local bookstores, all of your legendary independent bookstores like The Strand and Powell's, they all have websites.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can buy books from them. And I think that's a good option there. So if you're not in New York or Portland, Oregon, you could still go on the Strand website and still go on the Powell's website and still buy books that way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great.
I think it's a good thing to promote.
Yes, indeed. Okay, well, thanks a lot for coming on again.
Well, hey, thanks for inviting me. This has been really nice. This has been really fun.
Inked is published by Prospect Park Books. You can help Deconstructing Comics and all our podcasts by joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/deconcomics, and go to deconstructingcomics.com to connect to us on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, to shop on Amazon to support the show, and to find links to subscribe to the podcast. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and we'll critique it on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read at least 30 pages of it and critique it on the show. Next week, comedian Jamie Loftus has just completed a podcast miniseries called Ackcast, which aims to reconsider Kathy Geiswhite's comic strip Kathy. Loftus interviewed Kathy readers, other cartoonists, and Geiswhite herself in the 8-episode series, which is actually made up of 13 audio files. Emmett talks with Loftus next week on our show. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.